Yeah, the session, server-hosted desktops, what the vendors aren't telling you. I think all the vendors were in the session that was earlier this week, so that's the good thing. So the Q&A will probably be dominated by end users. I don't have to fight with vendors, so appreciate that. Could be wrong. We'll see. Okay, you guys know what Gartner does. I'm not going to explain that to you. I came over in the Gartner acquisition of Burton Group, and my job is to manage the tactical research arm for the virtualization and infrastructure as a service coverage. So that gets me involved in our evaluation criteria for hosted desktops and that kind of stuff. So we're very complementary in that space. I mean, if you think about Gartner research, there'll be a magic quadrant eventually for hosted virtual desktops, but the market's not mature enough yet for that kind of research to be published. But in the meantime, folks like yourselves are all trying to assess products, start some small-scale deployments, start to think about committing to a particular vendor. So that's where our evaluation criteria that we published earlier this year comes into play, and that's what I'm going to be talking about in this session, the criteria and then also how the vendors actually stack up against it. So just the things, just a quick backgrounder on the project, the evaluation criteria, some assessments and conclusion. I'm going to warn you, this is death by PowerPoint. I break every rule for PowerPoint development in this session. And someone on the surface would think this is a horrible deck, so you guys might too, because I think it has 35 tables in it with very small point fonts. So I'm warning you up hand. I'm not going to sit here and read all the tables to you, but I wanted it all in a deck because I wanted you to have the information to take back with you. I think that's the most important thing. So if you can't get it all here, don't worry about it. You can send me an email. I'll be happy to send you a copy of the slide deck when it's over. It'll also be on VMworld.com probably in a couple of weeks. Okay, the background. This started out as a 5-month Burton Group project. It's actually been going on for a couple of years. I've been working with many early virtual desktop adopters on their deployments and learning a lot of things from what they had done well and some things that had gone wrong and things they didn't expect. And use that to start forming a baseline for what we call evaluation criteria for identifying, or differentiating virtual desktop solutions. So what we did is I took the preliminary criteria to many of our early adopters and started working with them to figure out, okay, what do they absolutely need for virtual desktops? What do they think are nice to haves but they can probably live without? And what are some things that some folks need but others don't? And that's what formed the basis for our evaluation criteria. After we got done with several customer engagements, we then took it to the vendors, and we did 2 rounds of review with the vendors. And it was all the major vendors you would expect in the space were involved in this. They've all seen this several times. And I can tell you at the beginning, there were some vendors that didn't agree with everything. And they said, nobody has this product. Nobody has this in their product, so how can you rate us on it and say we're not good enough? I said, role-based access controls is a good example. If I can't delegate administrative duties, you're not an enterprise product. Bottom line, you're not. Cry me a river. So that's how it is. And another one, just to give you another example of that, when we wrote the criteria, when I've talked to clients about virtual desktops, a lot of organizations are saying, I don't know if I really need this for 100% of my desktops. I don't know if I'm ever going to get there. But I know I need to do things like broker to Xen app. I know I need to do things like connect users to SaaS services. And I've talked to some clients that said, for a percentage of my user base, software as a service is going to do it. I don't need to give them a full desktop. So for a long time, there's been a lot of organizations saying, I'm trying to slice up how I deliver applications to users. Virtual desktop is a part of it, but it's not the whole thing. So my challenge is to be able to integrate all of these different delivery services together. So when we wrote our criteria, we have a criteria called horizontal application scaling, which means basically being able to slice and dice my app delivery across different platforms. And in it, we specifically called out software as a service integration. And at the time, some vendors said, that's unfair, no vendor's doing that, no vendor's going in that direction. And again, we said, we don't care. It's a customer requirement. So we're putting it in there. We're not saying it's going to break the deal or not. So we listed it as a nice to have. But these were the kind of things that we put in there. And what we try to do with putting the criteria together is make it a document that's good for at least 2 years. So there's some forward-looking things in there. There's some things vendors aren't doing yet, but they were customer requirements driven, and that's why they got in there. And in the end, the vendors appreciated it too, because it basically means, look, here's the rules. Here's how we're assessing your products. It's published research. It's all up front. There's no surprises. And then we just go down and we do an assessment of the products themselves. We test them hands-on in our labs just to make sure that they do everything as advertised. And a lot of times we do find some things along the way, and we just go back to the vendor and work through that. So what was the outcome? We had a 45-page report that digs into all of the criteria itself, a lot of notes that differentiate what might look like a feature from what we call a marketing checkbox, right? It means, yes, we can do this, but the implementation is so horrible that you really can't use it for anything useful. So, there's a lot of that in there too. We've published so far 3 product profiles on Citrix, VMware, and Quest. Since VMware View 4.5 was just announced, we've already updated our profile for VMware View, and that will be published next week. I think, probably by middle of the week that the full assessment of VMware View will be online. So I can't get into all of the full assessments, obviously, of all these products, but I'll get a lot done in this session. We have more on the way. Microsoft will be published soon. We have Oracle VDI is going to be published probably in the fall as well. And if there's any others you feel that are missing that you'd really like us to dig down in, let us know. Just keep in mind, there's other products that just kind of fit slightly outside of this model. We were looking at some vertical solutions for hosted virtual desktops. So you see these main vendors that can do that there. But that does mean that some vendors that have very good connection broker technology, like LeoStream, for example, were just not included in the assessment, simply because there's other criteria we were looking for. Again, it doesn't mean LeoStream's not a good product, because it is. We have a lot of enterprise customers using it. It's just outside of the scope of what we're analyzing here. Okay, so here's the structure. Again, I think I've already kind of mentioned how, this entails a long-term commitment, 3 to 5 years or more. Again, folks understand that if I'm committing wholesale to desktop virtualization, I'm really restructuring how I'm delivering desktops and applications. There's a huge capital investment in bringing this forward, and it's going to take me some time to see a return on investment. So basically what that means is you want to be right in the solution you pick. The features, we assess them, grouping them into 3 buckets: required, which we consider absolute necessities. Now, just so you understand, this was done in the context of the large enterprise organization. So we're talking tens to hundreds of thousands of desktops is what we base the criteria on. Obviously there's products that are not written or developed for that type of audience, like the Microsoft VDI suite. That's not the audience they're targeting. So, while we assess them against this large enterprise criteria, our position is, look, that was never Microsoft's intention. They're designed to be departmental level, small business solution. That's how they pitch the product. And, we say, yeah, for that type of environment, for many customers, it's okay. Optional features would be use case-driven features needed in select deployment scenarios. And to give you an example of that, we listed Windows XP 64-bit support as an optional feature. We have a lot of customers that have nothing that runs on Windows XP 64-bit. We have some companies that do. So we just listed that as something you might need. So that might be required for you, but for other companies, that type of feature is optional. And of course, we're not saying this is what every company needs. And the way most of our clients use this, like the publish report has all the tables already in there. They just copy and paste the tables. It becomes like a starting point for their RFP. They move things around and figure out what's important to them. It just gives them a few ideas, really. This is by no means meant to be this definitive thing. Here's all the evaluation criteria. So these are all the things that we look at in the vendor platforms. User experience, service advertisement, and connection brokering. We're looking at business continuity features, networking, storage, how well you can integrate with back-end virtual infrastructure, management capabilities, security, guest operating system support, licensing, product support, and then finally the third-party vendor support. Because again, it's not always just the core technology. I need an ecosystem around that technology. So I need support from application vendors in this space and different OS vendors in this space, different management vendors in the space. That drives the solution as well. And that's always the interesting thing, right? When we see these great TCO calculators from vendors, and I haven't looked at the white paper published this week, but the bottom line is when I buy a desktop solution, I'm not just buying the core technology. There's a lot of add-ons I wind up buying too. A lot of folks, they might start with Citrix or VMware, but they're buying AppSense seats as well to complement their desktop solution. So that those types of things have to be figured into the cost assessment. And power savings, guys, power savings, I don't care. And I'll tell you why. I'm green, believe me. I got the barrels, for saving water and, not using public water. I'm as green as the next guy, trust me. But when I'm talking to IT guys about the power savings of VDI, you're going to spend more on power and cooling than you did before. The reason for that is you're doing the facilities group a favor, because it's usually facilities that's paying the budget for powering the office space. So those guys are going to save some money. So in the grand scheme of things for the company, you're a good person. You're saving the company money. but your power and cooling budget is probably going to go up. I mean, it's just the reality of that's affected most folks within the organization. Maybe you're going to be able to get some of those funds transferred from facilities, which is fair, but that's something you're going to have to work out and plan for. Okay, product assessments. Let's just go ahead and get into it now. Starting off with XenDesktop 4 Service Pack 1. Again, for us, our position has always been if a product does not meet all of our requirements, it's just not an enterprise product. And so we try to be very specific about what we think is required and not. In the last release, the previous release of XenDesktop 4, this was pre-Service Pack, there were some key things that were just not in the product. It didn't have role-based access controls. It did not have administrative change logging support. So I didn't have an audit trail for my administrative actions, for example. It did not have what we would consider to be an enterprise support policy. Some parts of the XenDesktop suite had full support for as little as a year. And that was really things like the non-sale products, like the ICA client, for example. They would support the current and previous release, but nothing beyond that. And there's some other products that were in the suite that were like that too. But by the time they dropped Service Pack 1, that had changed. So what you can see is they're very strong in a lot of areas. And what I'm doing, just so you guys understand, right now I'm going through high-level summaries of each of the products, and then after that I'm going to drill down into all of our tables and go through very detailed analysis of each. Bottom line here, it meets all the requirements for large-scale enterprise deployments. It's also suitable for small-scale to large enterprises. There's a complete core feature set. It does lead in both security and user experience features, which you would expect. I mean, Citrix has been working on the ICA protocol and optimizing ICA and HDX for a long time. It does have a very rich feature set. And again, I don't think that's really any surprise there because Citrix has so much experience in this space. The strengths, again, complete core feature set. Flexible desktop and application delivery, that had been a very big deal in a lot of pilots for several clients I had worked with because they're not trying to just move everybody off the XenApp farm. There's a lot of cases where they do a full hosted virtual desktop assessment and they say, well, you know what, for these use cases, these users only need a couple of apps. I'm better off putting them on XenApp than I am giving them a full-blown virtual desktop. We have some clients that say, you know what, I want to use, say, virtual desktops internally, but if I'm accessing applications from home, I just want to give them a couple of published apps on the XenApp farm. So a lot of clients want that type of flexibility where I can broker to different technologies and manage all of that collectively and have that difference in user experience. So that's something that Citrix has offered with FlexCast and giving you capability to go between XenDesktop or XenApp, and that's been a core strength. Now, just prolonging the battle with VMware versus Citrix here, VMware, as you guys had seen, announced Project Horizon, which is a huge, huge deal because what they did not show on stage with Horizon is that in addition to having that integration with software as a service, I also have that integration now with published apps on XenApp. And after the demo, I saw Steve Herod last night. I said, Steve, this is one thing I thought you could have done. And he said, yeah, I agree with you. We should have shown that too. So I think they'll be a little bit more public about some of the XenApp integration they have also on their websites. But that is there in the product, and it's a big deal, along with the single sign-on capabilities they have. Okay, other strengths of the XenDesktop platform supports multiple virtualization platforms, so I can have multiple backends, vSphere, XenServer, Hyper-V. I can pick and choose as I want. Strong user experience feature set, again, very rich user experience capabilities. Diverse endpoint operating system compatibility, so Linux, Mac, Windows, netbook, iPhone, iPad. I can run the Citrix receiver product on any of those. There's a rich supporting ecosystem. There's a lot of vendors that support the Citrix platform. And again, that goes back to Citrix's history with vendors in the Windows application space. Strong WAN performance. Citrix is the only vendor that satisfies our minimum requirements for WAN performance. And that's able to support resource-constrained environments with a bandwidth of no more than 50 kilobits and latency at 150 milliseconds or higher. There's not a vendor that will offer a solution besides Citrix, and they'll stand behind it and say we support it. That includes VMware. So, and again, it's not to say that I want to necessarily access a virtual desktop on a 50 kilobit link, right? That's just, an exercise in frustration, right? And even when I talk with Citrix customers talking about XenDesktop, and they say, well, we have this offshore facility, and we have this really, low WAN, sometimes it's even 30 kilobits, and we're thinking about not going with XenApp, but we're going to switch from XenApp to XenDesktop. And I say, well, how's the Xen app experience? They're like, well, it's not that good. And I said, well, XenDesktop, it's not going to be any better. So you can only squeeze so much through a pipe, right, regardless of the product. So what some organizations do is they look at tiered architectures instead, where I put some hardware at that remote facility instead. So for us, supporting that WAN environment, we're not trying to dictate the implementation and say that it all has to be done through the protocol, because there's only so much the protocol can do. A tiered architecture where I might have like a caching or a proxy server at that branch office, for example, is another alternative. One way that Citrix is solving that is with their partnership with a company called Kavizza, which does VDI in a box. I can drop a single server in that remote facility. It will sync back to the mothership so that from my user's perspective, they're accessing their virtual desktops over the LAN, but I'm still able to remotely manage that over the WAN connection. And they still just have thin clients and that's it. If you compare that to VMware View, the View solution would involve the local mode desktop feature. And the issue there is I still need thick clients at the client endpoint. So for some of our clients that have offshore concerns, they don't want thick clients in front of their users. They want thin clients because they do have concern about data theft, for example, and privacy. Okay, let's get into some weaknesses. There's no security hardening guidelines that are published, and right now there's not a vendor that is publishing security hardening guidelines specific to virtual desktops. We're getting closer. I think you're starting to see some of that with both VMware and Citrix and some of their key partners in the security space. So hopefully we're going to get a lot further there, because there are some real security problems in virtual desktops. Deployment of antivirus software can be an exercise in frustration. Anybody experience that? Yeah, AV in a non-persistent desktop, that's good times, right? That's really selling it to your users. They're like, yeah, VDI. Awesome. Yeah, so these are some of the things we're working through. Deployment and management complexity. Citrix has a lot of management consoles. That's probably an analyst stating the obvious there, which we're good at. But, if you look at XenDesktop, there is some complexity and scalability associated with it. A management domain, a desktop delivery controller, can scale to no more than 5,000 objects. So if you put that into context of one of the Citrix reference accounts that they announced at Synergy, it was a 140,000 seat deployment. That's a planned deployment. The seats haven't been deployed yet. So I have 140,000 seats divided by 5,000. That means I have 28 separate management domains. And there is no way to tie those together to centralize policy management across those domains today. So it's a scalability limit that's native to the product. vSphere, and I'll get into that with VMware View, it does better. It does 10,000 objects per management domain. So it's not necessarily to say that I can't have separate domains, which is fine, but I need to have a way to centralize policy distribution. XenDesktop has several consoles. Again, some environments I might be using 5 consoles per XenDesktop environment. So if I multiply 5 by 28, right, it's a big number. What is it? 90? I get that right? Okay. Full disclosure, when I went to college, I majored in information technology because computer science majors had to do a lot more math. I'm not embarrassed to say that. So, simple multiplication, yes, I might struggle with that on stage. Okay, configuration file and virtual desktop image integrity checks. Being able to verify that an image itself, the config file or the virtual desktop, is authentic, right? Is in its original form before I let it start. They don't have that type of capability. Again, these are things that would fall into our preferred features category. So it's not necessarily a deal breaker. It hasn't been, but just things that are nice to have. Okay, here's the View 4.5 scorecard. This is the first release where VMware satisfied all of our required criteria. They had similar limitations to Citrix. View did not have support for role-based access controls in View 4.0. It did not have complete administrative change logging capabilities. It also did not support Windows 7. So the Windows 7 guests were experimental at the time. They weren't officially supported. One other real key missing part of View 4.0 was enterprise management integration. There was no API. There was no SNMP. If there are questions, I will take them at the end of the session, just for the sake of time. And if anybody been in the View 4.5 beta program? What do you think about the management console? Night and day, right? It's, VMware just, flushed it down the toilet, started over again, and nailed it. It's an Adobe Flex-based management console. It has some very rich integration. It's very well done. They really got it right with the View 4.5 console, in my opinion. So that was the other shortcoming that we saw in View 4.0. Again, that was all corrected in 4.5. Bottom line assessment, it meets all of our features for large-scale enterprise deployments. It's suitable for small-scale to large enterprises at this point. Rich integration with VMware product portfolio. Strengths, rich integration with vSphere. Solid core feature base again. Centralized management is very good. There's literally a very clean install for View 4.5. I do have View Composer for link mode desktops, but other than that, I do have this very strong central management that also includes ThinApp today. Best-in-class management scalability at 10,000 desktops, simple deployment, and finally, Active Directory integration is very touch-free. I have some details in the tables how that's slightly different with the Citrix product, which does require a separate organizational unit for the desktop delivery controllers. That hasn't been a deal breaker to really any of our clients because most organizations today, they're creating separate OUs for the virtual desktop environments anyway, or at least child OUs. And the reason they do that, if you look at XenDesktop or View, the majority of the policy-based enforcement capabilities and the policy settings come in group policy templates. So if I really want to do good policy-based management, I need an OU structure that can let me just place my virtual desktops in their own OU so I can then link the correct group policy objects to them. Weaknesses, again, no security hardening guidelines. There's no native endpoint security health assessment integration. And what we mean by that is the ability to verify some type of security health on that endpoint prior to allowing a connection to occur. So I might want to make sure that there's an appropriate antivirus signature level there, or that there's an appropriate, host-based intrusion prevention software. Again, there's different things that I can do on that endpoint before I allow the connection, and that's just to make sure there's not things like software keylogger, for example, on that endpoint. Because it's one thing to have my data secured in my data center, but I want to make sure I'm not having keystrokes intercepted, for example. That comes up with some organizations. And VMware says, well, you know what? There's a lot of our VPN partners that already offer those types of capabilities natively, and some of our security partners do, and that's fair. But again, that is something that Citrix does have capabilities to do today through Citrix Receiver. VMware does not. USB device access restrictions is not something VMware View can do. I can say a USB device can either be on or off. That's basically what you can either allow USB devices or not allow them at all. I can't do things like whitelist USB devices and say these specific serial numbers, for example, can actually connect to my desktop environment. Other brokers can do that. LeoStream has been doing that for a long time. I do have some support there in XenDesktop as well. There's no user application self-service yet. Once Horizon is a shipping product, that changes. So I do have some self-service provisioning capabilities. PC over IP immaturity. It's a work in progress. I know Teradici does not like me to use the word immature with PC over IP. I'm sorry. Give me a better word. I'm not a marketing guy. The issue here, guys, is WAN accelerators. A lot of our enterprise clients have them. They want to be able to support branch offices with WAN accelerating devices. And it's not that I can't push PCOIP through a WAN accelerator, because I can. I just can't get a benefit of acceleration. And that's because PC over IP was built to with encryption and compression natively in the protocol. So it's a point-to-point encryption that occurs within the protocol stack. And there's not a capability today to disassemble that so that I can do the compression at the WAN accelerator device and then reconstruct it on the receiving end. Now, there's debate there. I mean, there is a position, and you'll probably hear it from VMware. You'll hear it from Teradici. Well, it doesn't matter because we're already optimized. We do a great job compressing. Great. I have the branch office. I have 50 people that want to watch the human resources video. Now I'm going to have to send 50 separate unicast streams of the same video down. I shouldn't have to do that. I mean, it's a little optimization. They'll probably get there eventually. May or may not be a deal breaker. But again, just thought I would mention that. Low bandwidth WAN support, I mentioned already. VMware does not have a supported solution for highly resource-constrained WAN environments. This was something, to be honest with you, with both vendors last year, it upset a lot of our clients. You know, thank you, VMware and Citrix, for showing us 1080p video and showing us how to do Iron Man on a virtual desktop. That's great. You know, but my use case is offshore developers, and you don't have a solution for that. Well, you get what you prioritize for. I mean, it made the technology look good, but my favorite thing is that when they're showing virtual desktops, they show movies and they show people playing video games. Right? Those are the last things I want my users doing. But I understand, right? If we have somebody, Bill in accounting, working on a spreadsheet, that doesn't get it done for you either, right? So, all right. Low bandwidth LAN, we talked about that. Supports only VMware-based backends. That may or may not be a big deal, depending on where your allegiance is to the hypervisor. There's no XenApp integration. Again, that does change with Project Horizon. Okay, here's a Quest V Workspace now. And as you can see here, they do not meet all of our required features. They're pretty strong in both preferred and optional, so they do have a pretty large feature base. But some of the things that are important to the large enterprise has been where Quest has fallen short. The reason for this, there's no enterprise management integration, so even basic SNMP support is not in the product. There's no administrative change logging, i.e. an audit trail for administrative actions. There's a very short support life cycle. Right now you get full support for 1 year, and you get extended support for 1 year. So that's it. Your support life cycle is 2 years. Most people can't even get an ROI in 2 years in a virtual desktop environment. I know there's some creative research out there that says you can. And I just wasn't a creative writing major, but I can just speak for the customers we have. I mean, and that's why it's kind of held up adoption. And I think that's also why you're seeing some of these white papers published this week with VMware, for example, and some of their partners that's been able to drive that CapEx down quite a bit. So that's something we're going to look at very closely and see what that looks like. Okay, it does have a couple shortcomings. We see this well suited for small and medium enterprises. There's very rich Windows integration, solid integration with AppV, for example. There's broad endpoint support. Quest has a lot of good vendor relationships. Just some of the management capabilities, for example, give us concerns about using this in a large-scale enterprise environment. Strengths supports multiple virtualization backends. Again, ESX, Hyper-V, for example, no problem. Ease of deployment. The strong user experience feature set is very good. Diverse endpoint compatibility. Again, I can run vWorkspace and connect to it from a good array of endpoint devices. Weaknesses, there's no security hardening guidelines. We don't have any admin change logging support. There's no published management APIs or SNMP support. The product support is limited to 2 years. We don't have a third-party ISV certification program. So I can't get assurances from some of my Windows application vendors, for example, that their products would be supported in Quest V Workspace. Other larger enterprise products like VMware and Citrix do have those certification programs. There's no support for disconnected virtual desktops. Again, some organizations like that model, and there are some use cases that drive it, so that is important in some scenarios. No support for common smartphones, tablets, and netbooks either. Okay, here's the Microsoft VDI suite. Pretty good and required. Not bad and preferred. Pretty good and optional. It's probably a more complete platform than a lot of folks would think. Bottom line, it's not a solution for the large enterprise, and Microsoft will tell you that. It's designed to scale to hundreds of desktops. They do not want it to scale into thousands, and they will not support you there. And if that's your scalability requirements, Microsoft has been very forthcoming about recommending their joint solution with Citrix. And I have a link to that later in the presentation. Microsoft, again, I have that there. Again, the hyperlink, if you want to look at that, is later in the presentation. There's no concurrent user or named user licensing models. So again, that's the licensing structure has not been something that many of our clients had wanted. They wanted to have concurrent or seat-based licensing options at least. Microsoft only offers a device-based model today. We see it well suited for small and medium enterprises. There's rich Windows integration, simple deployment and management. There's broad endpoint support. Again, just like today, right? A lot of you have been using terminal services for specific use cases because you're getting it with the product, low cost, and it does a job to a certain degree, and it's fine for that. You're using other products for more advanced use cases where you need improved functionality, and Microsoft is fine with that. They've been very upfront there. Strengths, the Windows platform integration, as you'd expect. Management capabilities are very good. Value, and finally, there's a strong supporting vendor ecosystem. They're Microsoft. They can dictate support. So, they can get very good support alignment for their products. They always have been able to do that. Weaknesses, scalability. Again, if we want to go beyond hundreds of desktops, we need the joint solution with Citrix. That's what Microsoft will point you to. Required management consoles. There are a lot of consoles in the entire VDI suite because it also includes things like Ops Manager and Config Manager, for example. That's not necessarily a big deal in the context of virtual desktops because most likely you would have different administrators using those consoles anyway. So you guys always know, right? And when you're talking about consoles, it's really in the context of who's using them. I don't know. Has anybody ever seen the single pane of glass? I saw some grainy photos. It kind of looked like the Loch Ness Monster, but I just, I couldn't confirm it. It's, there's some tales in the wild, right, that it exists, but we just, hard to track that thing down. Okay, disconnected virtual desktop support, not there. Low bandwidth, high latency WAN support, not there as well. Again, many of you know that. That's why there's been vendors historically that have innovated around and on top of the RDP protocol to extend its capabilities. So really no surprises there. No integration with the storage array provisioning features. So if I want to be able to richly integrate with things like NetApp Flex Coning capabilities, for example, I'm not going to be able to do that native to the product itself. I would have to use third-party software to fill that gap. Okay, so here's a rundown of how they all look together right now. Just for comparison's sake, you can see where each is each slightly different. Again, I think as you'd expect, because of the time they've been in the space, Citrix, between required, preferred, and optional, has the strongest feature set. VMware right there with required. They're getting there with preferred, and they're starting to get there with some of the optional criteria too. That brings them up a little bit further. And for what it's worth, we have, when we broke this down, it's 52. We have 52 things we look at for requirements. We have 10 things we look at that are optional. 62. Why do I try to do math on stage? So there's 38. There's 38 preferred features that we assess. Okay, now the boring part of the presentation. I'll do this for about 15 minutes or so and just kind of run through some of these where some of the differences are. I'm not going to read the slides to you because, again, I can get them to you later or they'll be on VMworld.com pretty soon. But this gives you the details of all of the platforms and how they really stack up against each other. So you can see for the mainstream client operating system support, all of the platforms are pretty good here. They all have strengths when it comes to being able to connect from a rich amount of endpoints. Including, as far as Microsoft, you see a link on the bottom there. That's because I can use Linux tools like RDesktop, for example, to be able to connect to Windows desktops from Linux-based operating systems. Connecting from mainstream thin and zero clients. All of these vendors here you can see are pretty strong there. I have many of the thin client vendors listed that they would be able to connect from. Now we get into things like dynamically adjusting for changes in the endpoint monitor configuration. This is something that all of the products do have some capabilities to support. Again, Microsoft was able to get in there with some of the things that they've added to the RDP7 protocol. Now, again, this is important to be able to support user roaming, because I might have users switching between different terminals or leaving a desktop at work and then logging back in from home, so I need to be able to adjust to those changes in that endpoint monitor. Having a universal printer driver is going to allow me to, again, have printer roaming capabilities. So if I switch endpoint devices, I'm going to be able to now connect to that the printer that's local to that device. ThinPrint has been obviously influential in this space, and like VMware View, for example, they OEM the print roaming capabilities. Dynamically adjust for changes, then because of that driver, they can adjust for changes in the endpoint printer configuration. They should be able to mask the impact of network latency on user-initiated actions. Citrix, Quest with EOP Extreme can do it. VMware can do this with PCOIP's progressive build feature. So if I have some differences in latency on the network interruptions, for example, these protocols do have capabilities to handle that. RDP does not have those capabilities today. Supporting multiple monitors, all of the vendors can do that today. Supporting a common USB devices, all of the vendors can do that today. So we're talking things like mass storage, human input interface devices as well. Printers, scanners is typically what you see among all of the vendors. Supporting persistent desktops, so that would be the personal virtual desktop for a user. They can all do that. Supporting a pool of shared non-persistent desktops is something that is also supported by the vendors. Being able to play back multimedia content, this was really a problem early on, but it's definitely gotten a lot better in the desktop virtualization space. A few years ago, I would work with clients, and they would get these assessment guides from the vendors, and it wouldn't have things that are essential in them, like a test validating that I can actually see Adobe Flash remotely. And it's like, whoops, well, we can stream 2D video, well, great, but, I use Flash all the time, too, so that's also important. Audio-video resource utilization, tuning and control. All of the vendors can do this, and what's really interesting here is for most of them, this is being done through group policy. So you look into the The ADM files that you would get, say, from VMware would just be PCOIP.adm, and that's where I can get into some of the tuning capabilities at the protocol level. Broker should run on a mainstream x86 server operating system. We put that in there because for many of our clients, they're concerned about certification, and depending on internally what the IT department will allow, sometimes solutions that are based on things like just enough operating system, for example, are not always allowed in every enterprise. So that's why we put that in there. The broker should scale to support 5,000 concurrent connections. Again, all of the platforms can do that today. VMware would lead here with 10,000. Quest will support up to 2,000. Microsoft, we give them a no because they're not publishing any scalability numbers. If they publish scalability numbers that meet this, then we would change that to a yes. So, and that's how we've been with all of the assessment, especially for scalability. If the vendor is not willing to put that online in a public domain in a reference architecture, for example, or at least in a knowledge base article, then we say no until you do. We don't want you just to tell us something behind closed doors just to satisfy us in terms of scalability testing. You have to put it out there too. Connecting users to server-hosted desktops and PC blades. All of the platforms are capable of that. I just have a note in here on VMware. The PC blade would require a Teradici host card in the blade. I can also use other technologies in that blade too, such as HPRGS, for example. I should have a web-based connection interface. Again, some basic stuff here. I should support a standard industry or de facto remote display protocol. All of the vendors do that. I should enable session reconnection from both current or new endpoints. We can do that too. And again, all of these do have some inactive session timeouts. I just listed that in the case of VMware View, which is set to 10 hours. And again, that's one of the things that you have to play with, right? I may want to disconnect a session, but I don't necessarily want to shut a desktop down, which all of the products will let you do that too. And you just have to be careful about which desktop pools you would want to assign that to, right? I mean, the C-level executives are not turning off their desktops. They can have it on for 6 months and not touch it, and I'm going to leave it there, right? Other folks, well, sorry, you lost something that was open, suck it up, deal with it, fix it. There's a reason I'm not supporting end users, guys, right? It's probably easy to tell. I was on a very, narrow career trajectory doing that. No single point of failure. Again, virtual desktops is mission critical technology, so I can't have a single point of failure because an outage into virtual desktop delivery infrastructure, that doesn't just mean, I have one desktop that's down. I can have hundreds or thousands of desktops that are down. So single point of failure in the delivery architecture is very important, and that's something that all four of these products do offer. I have resiliency in the delivery architecture. I can architect for resiliency in the backend databases, so I can have a fully resilient infrastructure to deliver these solutions. Failure detection, isolation, and recovery. Again, all of these have the capability to identify failures in the delivery architecture and then say restart a service, for example, if there is a failure, so that I can continue to move forward. Again, some of these are doing it differently. I might be using LDAP replication between different delivery controllers to synchronize data. There's different implementations, but the bottom line is that I do have that failure detection and recovery. Integrating with application delivery controllers is something that all of the vendors can do to a point. The difference is that Quest says they will interoperate with them, but they don't publish a list of supported devices. Supporting productivity applications at reasonable bandwidth and latency. We define that as reasonable bandwidth and latency to us is 200 kilobits and less than 50 milliseconds of latency. So that would satisfy the user connecting from home to a regional data center, for example, and that would satisfy scaling pretty well even within the confines of a corporate office facility. So again, reasonable tasks would be things like manipulating Word documents, scrolling through PowerPoint, using some of your line of business applications. I should be able to do that at an average of about 200 kilobits, and that is something that all of the vendors can do. And just to show you how we have tried to hold vendors to task here, the link here for Quest was a knowledge base article that they wound up publishing through the process of going through the assessment with us. Because all of their all their documents have said that they require a minimum of 384 kilobits. So we said, well, that's not good enough. We would prefer that you can get a little bit lower than that. And they said, well, we can, but we just didn't have anything. So they wound up putting up a knowledge base article stating their support position there. Offering dynamic traffic prioritization, so being able to prioritize traffic. in real time based on, in order to maintain user experience is something that's also very important. Like, for example, I want to give all of the user-facing features higher priority than things like printing or loading a file, right? So the things that would affect user experience, I want to be able to prioritize, and that is something that all of these products can do to a degree. Integrating with VPN appliances, again, across the board, we're good here. Supporting a remote access gateway. This is for branch office solutions, for example, or smaller businesses that may not need or may not have a VPN gateway in their data center. So that's why that's important. Integrating with third-party array storage provisioning features. So this means that if I'm provisioning, say, 100 desktops, I can just from the administrator, I just go to create the desktops and I'm done. And behind the scenes, transparently, I'm able to kick off, say, cloning operations in the storage array that would automatically create those files for those desktops. Again, to us, that's important, especially to try to scale an enterprise solution. All of them can do it except to some degree. Again, you have to look specifically at your storage vendor and see what the integration is. Again, I have the details on the slide. The only one that cannot is Microsoft. They do require a third-party solution, such as Citrix Essentials for Hyper-V, to make that connection. Integrating with the server virtualization platform storage provisioning features. So now instead of doing it at the array level, being able to do it with the server virtualization platform, supporting things like thin provision virtual disks or Hyper-V differencing disks is something that these solutions can do. Hypervisor support for memory overcommit is something that they can all do as well. In the case of Microsoft, they will have that with Windows Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1. Now, something that's just interesting, a little side note here, is I'm currently going through the evaluation process with Oracle, and they do very intelligent, actually best-in-class memory page sharing. They do page sharing better than anybody. Because the way VMware does it today is it's a reactive dedupe, meaning that I have to load all my pages in memory, and then the hypervisor will go back through and walk your memory pages, look for redundancy, and then consolidate memory maps. If I'm bringing desktops up and down continually, I don't see that much of a gain there from technologies like memory page sharing. But what Oracle does is they run a driver in the guest, like all of them do, but their guest driver will transparently redirect my OS DLLs when they're loading to a shared memory location. Because I already know it's not rocket science. I know what DLLs XP loads when it boots. I already know what they are. So I don't have to wait and try to do it behind the scenes at the page level. I can just do it proactively. So as soon as a VM boots in the Oracle VDI suite, the memory pages are already deduped. So that gives you a better consolidation density. The only caveat so far with that technology is you have to use the Sun VirtualBox server on the back end. I cannot do that, say, with Oracle VM. They're Xen-based products today. Okay, supporting a virtual CPU to physical core oversubscription of at least 8-to-1. That would mean that if I have, say, 8-core server, so say I have a 2-socket quad-core system, I can run at least a minimum of 64 virtual desktops. All of the platforms, all the back-end infrastructure platforms will support that minimum level of scalability. If you've followed Project Virtual Reality Check, you've seen some benchmarks that can get scalability even beyond that. Again, this is a minimum level we're looking for. Management server should run on a mainstream x86 OS, and there's the details there. Just I want to wrap through this in the next few minutes just to have enough time for Q&A. Integration with enterprise management solutions, they can all do that with the exception of Quest. Another interesting thing about View 4.5 is VMware is releasing a management pack for System Center Operations Manager. That's something that a lot of customers have asked for, so I will be able to orchestrate some of the View environment now through SCOM. Quest does not have that. They are working on a SCOM management pack that's currently under development. Again, the console should support up to 5,000 desktops. They can all do that with the exception of Quest. Again, most of these vendors are at 5,000 today. VMware with View 4.5 can scale to 10,000. Management console should support multiple concurrent admins logged on. They can all do that. I should have policy-based management. And again, all of these do offer group policy templates. I have them linked here. I should have virtual desktop and endpoint search capabilities. I should be able to stream and have locally installed virtual application compatibility here. This is something you really have to look at, though. I mean, a lot of people I work with, they don't get enough help, in their opinion, from the vendors on what are some of the differences between the platforms. Just as an example here, I mean, IE6 support. How many of you have applications that still require IE6? Probably a lot, right? Yeah, a lot of companies do. So when you're looking at an application virtualization solution, being able to virtualize IE6 is a very important requirement and something you really have to make sure you validate in any type of pilot with some of these different vendors. Again, talked about the streaming capabilities, flexible management of the virtual desktop, OS, and application updates. This is meaning that I have other ways that I can start managing desktop delivery and even managing some application updating features. That's important because when organizations are looking at VDI, they're saying, well, if you improve TCO so much and I'm adding 5 more consoles to my management infrastructure, what am I taking away? And a lot of times what the vendor is saying, well, you're not really taking away anything. But the TCO is better. It's better. It really is. But yeah, you're going to have 10 more management consoles, but you really are going to save on management and operational costs. You will. Trust us. And again, I understand a lot of the TCO reduction comes from simplified image deployment and user self-service and blah, 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 right? You guys got all that. I only rain on the negative stuff. I don't pat vendors on the back enough for the positive stuff, probably. Okay, command line interface and scripting support. Everybody but Quest. Directory services integration, everybody's got that. You would think, it's 2010, we can just take that for granted. We can't. I mean, there's still plenty of products out there that just don't integrate with Active Directory. I mean, it's a basic feature. You think you can assume it. You just can't. Role-based access controls, again, this is something that all of the vendors do provide today. In the case of Citrix and VMware, that was just added. I had to really look for how granular I can get with role-based access controls with Microsoft, so there's a hyperlink there that explains that and what you can do. Client and management traffic is secured. They can all do that. Again, at least SSL at a minimum. Security logging and auditing of administrative actions, everybody but Quest. Supporting a standard remote access authentication protocol, they can all do that as well. Again, the details are in the deck. I should be able to support Windows 7 32-bit and 64-bit and Windows XP 32-bit. We made this a requirement for guest OS support because this is where our clients typically are at. If they're virtualizing OSs, those are the ones that are important to them. I should have a choice of concurrent and named user licensing. Microsoft does not. The VDI suite is licensed per device. They do give you extended roaming rights. So as long as all of your users have a primary device, it's kind of like per user. But if you have users that are sharing primary devices, then that's not the case. Okay, so that's where you need those concurrency models and some other options. Microsoft doesn't have that yet. They've taken a lot of customer feedback. They know it's important, and all I can tell you right now is they're working on it, and they are. I mean, they understand it's an important customer requirement, and they're working very hard to get that right. A 3-year minimum of market support. Again, everybody but Quest here. I should have at least a minimum of extended support for the product. They can do that. I should have published support life cycles when the product launches. Don't tell me in a sales meeting what your support policy is. You better have it online. So far, Quest has not put their public support policy online for 7.1, which is why they have a no there. If they do, we'll change that to a yes. I should have a certification program for third-party app vendors. Again, so far, everybody but Quest does have some type of app certification program. And again, this can be assurances of application support. That gets even more important with things like application virtualization. Certification for thin client vendors is, again, something that the vendors do have, certification capabilities there. A public user forum for application support issues. This is important here, and one thing I'll tell you, I gave VMware feedback that I would like them to have the equivalent of the Citrix Community Ready website, which is just outstanding, because if you look at the VMware support website today, I can't differentiate by product. I just know what vendors support something on VMware. I don't know if it's ESX, I don't know if it's vSphere, I don't know if it's View, I don't know if it's ThinApp. I can't tell them apart from the page. So what I would like them to do is have sort capabilities. That's something that Citrix offers, and they do a good job there. All right, to wrap it up, View 4.5, those of you that have nodded off, it's time to wake up because we're going to be leaving the room in a few minutes. View 4.5 and Citrix XenDesktop are the only enterprise-ready server-hosted desktop platforms. So we would recommend based on our criteria. Again, everybody sets their own, and this is just our opinion. So we commonly have clients that kind of move some things around. Quest v Workspace and Microsoft VDI we see suitable for small and medium enterprise or department-level deployments. Third-party add-ons we might be able to use to satisfy some existing feature shortcomings. You have to make sure you're doing that as part of your cost assessment. Again, a lot of folks will start with the core hypervisor, then they start looking at adding other add-ons like AppSense or RES software, for example, that helps complete the entire management stack. Management scalability meets today's requirements, but more work remains. We set the scalability numbers where we did because that's where most of our clients are going to be in the next couple of years. But a lot of clients understand that they need to be able to aggregate management often across tens of thousands of desktops. Again, it doesn't mean one management domain, but at least the ability to centralize management and policy distribution across all of that. And again, like I said, you know your requirements better than anybody, so set your own. Hopefully this helped just provide you some information on how the products are differentiated. Here's some additional information. If you have a relationship with a Gartner representative, even if you don't subscribe to the Burton Group research, you can just say, hey, I think I would like to evaluate it, and they'll just send you a free copy. So probably not supposed to tell you that, but whatever. Okay, with that, I think we got about 10 minutes left. Any questions? I'd prefer if you can use the microphone. There's one over here. If you just don't feel like getting up, I know it's hot in here, you're exhausted, you just shout it out. I don't care. Right here? Interesting product. I like Unidesk. Yeah, they're an interesting company, and I think what they've done well is they've positioned themselves well to be complementary to both VMware and Citrix solutions. A lot of folks like the layering technology. They're after virtual desktop nirvana, right, which is that shared desktop image, but also having personalization support and being able to do user-installed applications. I'm very high on Unidesk. Another one that I didn't mention is Ringcube, who it's a different approach, right? I need an OS on the endpoint, but they have some very rich security capabilities, some really nice management capabilities. It's a very lightweight package. I think they're different than Unidesk, but they're interesting. Unidesk I like a lot. Yeah. Do I see the client hypervisor as important? The answer is yes. Nice to finally meet you, Matt. But for most clients, it's a 2012 issue. It's not an immediate issue. So, long term, they like the idea of it. They like the idea of the bare metal client hypervisor and being able to distribute images, and having that hardware independence. Again, the goal really, right, and VMware says it a lot too, is user-centric computing. I don't want to have to tether a user to a device. So for the client hypervisor, part of it is about supporting those user-installed apps, but it's also about business continuity. So if a user loses the app, loses a laptop, I can get them another device. I can resync with the mothership because, like Zen Client, for example, has built-in synchronization capabilities. It's just an access device. I mean, I have an IBM X200. I don't cry. I'd only cry if I lost the IBM X200 Lenovo if I lost all my data in my work. If I already knew that was somewhere else, it's like, okay, IT, just give me another device, let's resync, and we're done. So I do like it, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for the OEMs like Dell and HP to be able to sell a service to end users, where instead of giving them a virtual desktop or a physical desktop, they're giving them a VM. But it's already, it's bundled with something like Zen Client or another bare metal client hypervisor. It allows them to sync that virtual desktop to the cloud. So now again, if I'm a home user, I lose the device or something goes wrong, I still have my desktop in the cloud. It's still there. There's a lot of interesting things we can do with the technology. So I'm pretty excited about it. Over here?
You kind of alluded to it. Do you see this playing into BYOC at all?
It's an interesting one. Do I see it playing into bring your own computer? A lot of folks are giving this a lot of thought, but there's a lot of governance issues associated with that makes it pretty tricky. I mean, with bring your own computer, or if I'm giving employees a voucher, I literally have to give them that computer, and they can quit tomorrow, and they can take it with them. And you have to be willing to accept that as a risk, because if you try to have any kind of partial ownership or take back, from a compliance perspective, you're now responsible for every bit of software that they install on the computer. It's a company device then, so you would be. And then you have some security issues. How do I treat that user partition? How do I keep it isolated from my network? I probably don't even want it on there. For example, when they're at work. So, some of those other issues need to be worked out, I think, before, folks are going there in a big way. And I think, when I was answering Matt's question, that's why people are thinking, 2012. Let some of the security vendors like McAfee and Trend really help us to nail the security on that space, where I can really manage it pretty tightly, and then I think it gets kind of interesting. Let's see. I think we got time for a couple more questions. Right? How often do we update the report? Good question. We structured it this way where we just do these individual assessments of each products because we do it with every major release. So the next XenDesktop release, we're going to do an update. The next View release, we're going to do an update. And it allows us just to update that single product. So we can be very rapid in terms of assessing new products, whereas if we had 5 vendors all in the same report, it's a lot bigger of an effort to go through a revision cycle. These are actually very fast, and that's why we structured it this way. In terms of the criteria itself, We'll probably do another update in, I don't know, probably sometime end of 2011, to be honest with you. I think we'll be able to let it go that long because it's, again, I couldn't show all of it. You didn't see really about half of it in the tables. I only showed the required features. But I think the preferred takes care of a lot of the concerns of our clients. But there is a lot coming, and that'll be the point. You know, to be honest, I'm speculating. Our clients tell us what to do. So if our clients say this is outdated, fix it, we're going to go and fix it. It's that simple. If that's in 2 months and we have a lot of complaints about it, then we'll go and fix it. Over here. Yeah, I mean, you know, PC over IP is a big source of debate. When I wrote my blog post about where our position was on Vue, I got some interesting comments about how can you say, you know, Vue is an enterprise product if PC over IP can't work through a WAN accelerator? Well, because I don't have to use PC over IP. You know, I can use RDP with Wise TCX. I can use HP RGS. There's other protocols I can use to deliver Vue. So if there is something that is really important to me in PC over IP that I need, well, I can get around it. And the other thing, though, if you look at Vue 4.5, there's a lot of changes in PC over IP. Windows 7 support is now very rich. I can do smart cards on Windows 7. I can do print roaming on Windows 7. I couldn't do those things before. There's some other things that aren't there. I can't do multimedia redirection with the Windows 7 guests with PC over IP. So there's some other parts. You know, Citrix has been doing ICA for a very long time, right? And you can't expect it to be on feature parity with Teradici, or excuse me, Teradici and Citrix to be on par. So, you know, it's not perfect. I mean, if that protocol is important to you, you know, you have to really look at the solutions. I think the more immediate need for VMware, though, is to have a really good solution for that remote office, that branch office. And I worked with an energy company earlier this year in January. They have a branch office in Canada. The last mile of their WAN is 40 miles long. So they're at this mercy of this, you know, very long WAN connection, and it's, you know, it scares them. So they're not going to run any virtual desktops over that LAN. They can't. They want a tiered solution where they can do something locally, but they really want more, kind of like what Kavizza does, for example, with VDI in a box. Ringcube can do something similar and integrate that. I can even do something like that with like a Unidesk product. So, you know, they're looking at other things like that. What I would like VMware to do, just as a long answer to your question, is have some kind of native capability to support that, where I have some kind of tiered system where I can run desktops locally, but then also to just connect thin clients. Okay, I think we can do one more question right here. Oh, thank you for asking that question. Because how much does WAN accelerators affect performance? I'm not sure how much I've sounded like an analyst today, but now I get to. It depends. So, you know, it's so application specific. I mean, I'm not trying to make light of the question because it's serious, right? And there has been some good benchmarks. I mean, Citrix has done some with their own native WAN accelerators. It can be a 30% improvement plus. It can be pretty significant with that technology. The gain you're going to get is going to be very driven by the workload, which is why I said it depends. So it's always what you're putting over the wire. And even when the vendors are doing it, sometimes it's going to be some very redundant type workloads in the benchmark. So you have to really kind of look in the benchmark. And what I always recommend is especially if you're a big enough company, make the vendor come out and help you with a pilot and prove it with your own stuff. I mean, that's always the best way to go. One more, if we got it. Right here.
Any thoughts, or are you going to do any work like this on the profile management program?
Yes, we are. It's on our to-do list. Probably early next year we'll have that done. You know, our biggest problem, to be honest with you, is scaling. We're looking for analysts. I mean, seriously. So if some of you are interested, we're trying to find enough good people to write the research. I mean, it sounds good on paper, but when there's a lot of other parts of the job that are just, you know, it pays the bills. So. All right, guys. Thank you very much.